Welcome to the UX Consultants Lounge. I'm Kyle Susi, founder of Usable Interface, an independent UX research consultancy. You can find out more about my work and the services I offer at my website, usableinterface.com. I'll be your host here at the lounge, where I'll be providing a place for UX consultants to gather, share stories, and learn more from one another. Today's episode is a special one. For the first time ever, I've invited a former client into the lounge. I know, bold move, but don't worry, we're still on good terms. My guest is Susan Mercer. And if you've ever wondered what clients really think during the hiring process, this is your episode. Susan pulls back the curtain and shares what goes on behind the scenes, how decisions are made, what builds trust, and yes, what consultants do that break that trust. Susan has over 30 years of experience in digital tech, with a career that's taken her through UI design, web production, product management, and a decade of leading UX research teams. She was most recently the director of user research at Viator, a TripAdvisor company, and has also taught grad students at Bentley. So she knows her stuff. And Susan has recently decided to embark on becoming an independent UX consultant herself. And we'll discuss why and what that experience has been like for her at the end of the interview. You'll hear more about our history working together, including a road trip that we took together across New England and one of the biggest diary studies I've ever tackled. I think it's a thoughtful and honest conversation. And if you're a UX consultant or someone who hires them, I think you're going to love it. Let's dive in. Please enjoy Susan Mercer. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the UX Consultants Lounge.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm excited to be talking to you today.
So this is going to be interesting because it's the first time I've had a client in the lounge, and I'm just so excited to have you share your perspective on what it's like working with UX consultants.
I'm excited to talk about it too. Been a great journey with me so far. So, yeah, happy to let people know what to expect.
Great. Before I dive into my list of questions for you, I wanted to give everyone just a little background on our history of working together. So we've been working together for a while. We've had two big projects together. In 2014, 11 years ago, we first worked together on a research study for an experience design agency based in Boston called MadPow. You were working there at the time as one of their lead researchers, and I was brought on as a subcontractor to help with the study. And I just remember loving this study because we were doing ethnographic interviews in people's homes, and it involved us taking a road trip together across New England. The product that we were actually researching, it was a medical device called an auto injector pen. And for those that are not familiar, it's just an injection device that enables the user to deliver a predetermined drug dosage through self-injection. And our study focused on people who had multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. And we had to interview them about how they use this device. And I just loved
Yes,
it.
I loved it too. It was great working with you. And we just learned so much. And I was so grateful for those participants to open up their homes and their hearts to share their experiences with us to help make things better for them.
Yeah. And it was a very private, sensitive topic. It was very moving, and it was just a great study. And it was wonderful to finally work together because we knew each other. You know, we were local in the industry. We seen each other at events, but we never had that opportunity. So that was awesome.
It was, yes.
And then flash forward in 2022, you were working as the director of UX research for Viator, which is a TripAdvisor company. And you hired me as a consultant to conduct a diary study with travelers. And for me, this was by far the largest diary study I had ever worked on. It was a 6-week diary study with 30 participants. And at the end of it, We ended up having over 400 diary entries and over 1,800 snippets of coded data. It was a lot, and I loved how big and juicy that study was.
It definitely was, and I really needed somebody I could trust with that study because it was so large and so important to our business. So I was really pleased to be able to work with you on that one.
I was so grateful for it because it was just fascinating. We were talking to people who were planning a vacation and trying to understand, what impacts their decisions, what happens when issues come up. And it was interesting to talk to people as they were planning a trip and having them submit diary entries, some of them daily, some weekly, and then doing these wrap up interviews. It just generated so much data, but it was a lot of fun. And I just really appreciated being brought in to conduct that study.
The real environment and the real usage information that you were able to gather and bring to the table was so valuable for us because folks inside the company often think that people come to a website and do everything all at once without realizing that there's little snippets of interaction over time.
Right, right. We got some diary entries where people were just waiting during their daughter's dance recital, like checking in on certain things on their phone, and they would take a picture of that. And it was just all these in between moments that they were just jumping in to do some travel planning.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's really our history in a nutshell. And now I'd like to ask you some questions about what it was like hiring consultants. And I want to divide this. So the first half is all about what UX consultants can learn from clients. And the second half will be about what other internal directors, managers, or leaders can learn about hiring UX consultants.
Sounds like a great plan. Let's do it.
All right. So, for the UX consultants, can you start us off by just explaining what the procurement experience is like from your side of the table?
In my experience, it does depend on the size of the company. As you can imagine, Vidar being part of TripAdvisor, it was fairly mature in the procurement process. But the first step is something I would do no matter where I am, that I would want to get 1 to 2 quotes from different consultants just to get a rough cost estimate to start. This is before I've even gotten approval for the project. So, as a consultant, I need you to understand that, hey, this is a potential. It's not promised yet. And I'm always upfront in my communications with that. And then I have conversations internally with the key stakeholder that needs to approve this. In my case, it might have been the chief product officer or VP. I may have it in a verbal conversation with them to sell. This is why we need to do this project right now. This is why my team can't do it, given our current priorities. And this is ballpark what it might cost. Any sort of verbal confirmation that I may get from them, I always follow up an email, of course. And then, if needed, I may also need to go talk with finance just to say, hey, I got so and so's approval. We're going to be looking into this. I need you to hold this money and make sure that they're okay with that. After that, then I would have a detailed scope discussion with the consultant to give even more information and get a more accurate proposal and SOW. Actually, just get a proposal at that point. Um, if I do get that approved, I may talk to 2 different consultants, choose one, get that final one approved from the executive sponsor, get that signed off. Then I need to work with procurement, and they will, 1, make sure that finance approves it, 2, what any sort of legal approval we need. At a company a larger company, we do need to make sure that we have a master services agreement signed, and it's usually our MSA that consultant will need to sign and agree to. That's very often non-negotiable.
Mhm.
And then the specific work will be defined in a statement of work or SOW. Also, we like our format for that. And then we can do that and get that all signed off electronically, and we're good to go.
I have so many questions. So, when you mentioned at first that you start off by just getting a rough estimate from consultants, how do you hold that number in your head? So, it's just a ballpark. You go and you give the heads up to finance, to whoever, that we might be spending roughly this amount of money. When you go
Yeah.
back and start doing that detailed scoping, obviously the number will probably change a bit. How does that affect things in your process? If it's over that ballpark or drastically under, how does that work?
Great question. So first off, whatever I get from consultants is the ballpark. I pad. I
Oh,
might put an
okay.
additional 20% on it just to buy me a little bit of wiggle room.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And then when we come back with a more detailed, if it's going to be above that, I may ask for two options. So, okay, let's take this original one with everything that I want in it. May ask the consultant to say, hey, can we get another estimate? Where can we, maybe my team, do a little bit more work if I can find that bandwidth? How can I help you bring that cost down a little bit? And then I can go to my executives and say, hey, what we really need is X, which is higher than what I told you before. We can do something for Y, but here's what we're missing. Here's the downsides to that. Because executives always want to know, what am I going to get? What is it going to cost? And what's the cost of not doing it? So that's where I need to be prepared to have that conversation with them.
And how do you feel about revealing the budget that's available to the consultant when you're getting that initial rough estimate or even getting into the detailed scope?
It depends if I know what the budget is,
Oh,
because sometimes I'm just asked, hey, go find out what this is. What is it going to cost us to do X? In which case, that's where I'm sourcing that information from the consultants. Because what I don't want to do is say, oh, it's going to be 25K, then go out, talk to consultants. No, it's really going to cost me 50. Because then I look bad and I don't want to underpay consultants either, if you know
this
what I mean.
yeah, absolutely, and this is really interesting because from the consultant side, it feels to be honest, it always feels like that is being withheld from us, like they know, but they're not sharing, and it's interesting to know that sometimes
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah. And sometimes just negotiation, I want to get the consultant's viewpoint first
Yeah.
and see what's included. And if it comes under what I was thinking, then, oh, you know what? Maybe we can bump that up a little bit more and go from there.
And what do you mean by that? Bump that up? Include more do more with
Include
the
more
project?
work,
Yeah.
do more with the
Okay.
project. And
Yeah.
frankly, when I work in house, I don't always keep up with what common consulting rates are. I remember when I engaged you, you said that was 2022. I hadn't worked in consulting for, gosh, about 6, 7 years, and prices increase over that time frame. And because I've worked on both sides of the house, I want to be fair to my consultants. I know what it's like being on that side.
It's so refreshing. And you mentioned too that you typically you'll get 2 bids. Is that something that you like to do? It was that dictated by Viator that you have to get at least 2?
A little bit of both. I don't recall if they dictated it. I know some companies do. Sometimes they need to go up to 3. But having to gives me the ability to make that decision of what I see as quality, what I see as needed versus money investment. Also to just sanity check to make sure I didn't happen to talk to one consultant that's overpriced or underpriced.
Mm. Yeah.
And that way as well, when I go back to get approval or talk with finance, if they start bringing up, or particularly procurement will bring up questions as well. How do we know that this was negotiated well? Well, I have 2 or sometimes 3 if they mandated proposals, and then I'm able to justify that price a little bit better.
So when you have 2 or 3 proposals or bids, do you have to present that? And if you do, to procurement or someone else, who ultimately gets to make that final call? that decision?
I It's usually with me as the director, as the person hiring it. I generally don't disclose the details of any of the proposals. I may say, "Hey, I chose this one. Yes, it's the most expensive, but the delta is only 5K to the cheapest. This is somebody that I feel will do the job best." If it's a 25K difference, then I might need to get somebody else involved,
And who
just
would
to
that?
give you a ballpark.
Okay, all right. When you say someone else, you
Yeah.
mean another bid or you mean someone on the internal side?
Oh, somebody on the internal side. I might
Okay,
escalate to my manager or the executive to have that discussion with them to discuss the pros and cons.
gotcha. Okay. And so since you're the main decision maker when it comes to approving a proposal and choosing a consultant, for you, what would you say tends to influence you the most? Is it cost, the proposed strategy, reputation, something else?
All of the above. I generally only talk to or approach consultants I know or have heard of, particularly freelancers that have a strong reputation. Price will come into it, but I care more about what am I going to get delivered?
Yeah.
Do I feel that the quality of the deliverable is going to be helpful to the business and to my team? Do I feel that the timeline is appropriate? Do I feel that they've estimated things correctly? Because I care about quality deliverables on time for a reasonable cost.
And with the MSA, you said that's really non-negotiable, at least in the experience that you had with the companies you've been at. Can
Mhm.
you talk about that a little bit more? Is there ever typically things you get pushback on, or what tends to be the red lines there?
Really, with hiring consultants, I haven't ever had any red lines for that. Where I get the red lines is when I'm working with tool vendors and
Yeah.
large corporations because there's a lot of clauses there for them around data uptime, data security, things like that. That's where they get their lawyers involved. And in general, it's very rare that our legal team will adjust an MSA. And
Okay.
if they insist on it, a custom MSA, that's a fair bit of time investment with our legal team as well.
And is that a turnoff for you when that has to happen?
Absolutely. I love the lawyers I've worked with, but it extends the time. There's a lot of back and forth that I'm always involved in the middle person communication
Mhm.
as the in between. And it just takes time out of my day. And most of the time, I don't think there's a need for it for freelance research consultants.
Yeah, luckily, from what I recall, the MSA for Viator, there was nothing that I needed to push back on. Everything seemed good. Usually, for consultants, the one thing that I hear most of us have issues with is when we're going to get paid. Sometimes it's something crazy like net 90 days after the final invoice, which most people cannot swing when they're independent, but having something more reasonable, like 30 days, definitely doable, and that's usually a point of negotiation, but I think I remember it being reasonable with Viator.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's also something we might be able to do in an SOW as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm wondering too, during this procurement process, from the consultant side, things can tend to sometimes go quiet, and I was wondering, is there anything consultants can do to support you during it or to make it go more smoothly?
Good question. I think keeping the lines of communication open is always good. Just saying, hey, wondering where things are. Is there anything I can do to help or any clarification you need? All of that is useful. I tend to be pretty transparent on that front. Say,
Mhm.
hey, my meeting got postponed. That happens.
Yeah.
I need to do the following. So and so is on vacation this week. So I'm willing to provide that kind of timeline feedback. And if there is any clarification I need, I reach out pretty quickly.
You mentioned it sounds like you have to really do a lot of selling sometimes where there's a cost difference or something, or the cost of not doing something. Do you like to have anything provided from the consultant that helps you to make that argument?
Good question. I'm hesitating for a second.
That's
I think that could help in certain situations, but usually I know why I need this study. So I know how and what the cost of not doing it is going to be because I understand the internals and the projects and what could go wrong on the projects if we don't do the proper research. But yeah, I'd definitely be open to conversations with consultants on that because people often find a different perspective than I may have forgotten.
And what do you look for when hiring a UX consultant? What makes a candidate stand out to you?
Definitely experience, definitely curiosity. I really like hearing a lot of questions from the consultants in that first call where we're just saying, hey, let's talk. I have a potential project. Here's what I'm thinking and why. But having that conversation back and forth, asking for further clarification, rather than making assumptions. I don't like when the first call I have with a consultant is all sell, sell, sell.
Yeah,
I'm looking for a thought partner.
I love that.
No, we've got a challenge or a problem to solve. How can we do it together? I think setting that tone happens in that first scoping call.
And is that different when it's when you're tapping people you know versus don't know?
Yeah, I think if people that I don't know well, um, I need a little bit more of that to see their thought process,
Mhm.
to be able to understand how much are they going to question, how curious are they? Because as you know, one of the core skills for you as a researchers is curiosity and probing and problem solving and problem identification. I want to be able to get that feeling from that consultant that they're going to engage and really help me think through as a thought partner, as I said.
And how do you find UX consultants to actually have that initial conversation with?
Great question. I'm fortunate enough to have worked in the research field for a long time, so I have a good network. I start with LinkedIn. Who do I know that's consulting right now? What are their areas of expertise? And I reach out to them. Sometimes I say, hey, I'm busy right now. Who can you recommend? And if I get a recommendation from somebody that I know and trust, I'm likely to transfer some of that trust to that recommendation person. Still want to see them prove it to me, but I'm more likely to trust them than a cold email or a cold LinkedIn message.
I can totally see that. Trust is just everything. It's so important when you're engaging in something that really requires the right person. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. When you talk about trust, what actions build trust during a project and what can erode it?
Good questions. I think building trust during a project, one is the consistent communication, knowing what's going on a weekly basis, being timely with requests for information or feedback. I'd rather have some over communication than under communication. That way I know what's going on. And on time or frankly, early delivery. We're always pleased with early and any warnings of schedule delays. Sometimes recruiting takes longer than we'd planned. I know that. I've been doing this for years. But that early warning about it can help me set expectations for folks internally as well. And in terms of eroding trust, I think not doing any of those things or misunderstandings that go on too long. I have had a couple situations where I've communicated something and then I hear back the next step and that hasn't been taken into account. That'll erode trust. I think talking with stakeholders directly without myself or one of my team members present until I say you can would be another thing
Yeah,
that would erode trust for me, just because I want to make sure I understand how to communicate with those stakeholders and be able to manage any misunderstandings or misknowledge or context. And obviously, any client confidentiality breaches just are no go for me.
definite. Makes you look bad. Yeah.
Exactly.
So communication definitely seems to be the theme here. And I was wondering I'm sure it varies from project to project, but do you have an ideal amount of times you like to check in with consultants once you've brought them on board? Is it weekly or twice a week?
It depends on the consultant and if I've worked with them before.
Mm.
If it's somebody that I fully trust and have worked with in the past, weekly might be fine, unless it's a very fast project, in which case maybe biweekly is better. So that's something I'm open to discussing when we kick off the project. If it's somebody that I'm new working with, I want a little bit more frequent updates just to make sure if they're making any assumptions and going a little bit off track, that I can minimize the amount of time before it gets corrected. And one of the techniques I like to do when I can is to, particularly as a director, I was very busy, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But if you'll recall, when we did the diary study, I had one of my lead team members working with you more directly.
Mhm.
And that way she was able to handle a lot of that more frequent communication, providing the context, providing past learnings that we already knew, and all of that kind of information without taking up my time as a director. So that enabled me to be fully trustworthy of a weekly communication.
I see. Yeah. And that worked out really well. I liked having that pairing where I was just paired with someone on your team.
I saw that worked really well, and that's something I plan to, would love to do in the future if that need comes up again.
Yeah. I was curious when you hired me, how did your team respond to bringing in a UX consultant?
That's a great question, too. The team was very busy on strategic stuff already, and we just didn't have the bandwidth for this, but we were very excited about getting a diary study. So they responded very well. They saw the need for the diary study, they knew how much time it would take. I had them embedded with their own teams, product teams, and they were very busy with those product and design teams, so they understood the need to bring somebody else in. And there wasn't any resentment on this one. I think this time it was just, "Hey, I wanna know what's going on. What's she doing? This sounds fun."
Yeah.
Um, I wish I could do it, but they understood the rationale.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. Cause it was such a cool project.
Yeah.
And I was wondering too, going back when you were talking about proposals and them being like the SOW has to be in your format. When consultants send proposals, do you prefer a certain format, whether it's Word docs or slides?
I do prefer Word docs for proposals. I think that gives a bit more room to be fully descriptive of the services and detail out all the deliverables, the pricing, etc. I rarely need to present that to anyone. If approvers wanted to see it, I can just screen share the document and scroll through it, and that's fine. And I think for most proposals for research, there isn't a need for huge visuals like a presentation would provide.
Okay. And what about the length of the proposal?
I tend to think about 2, maybe 3 pages,
Okay. Yeah.
unless it's a very large study. Usually, the types of things I'll outsource are small enough that it should be able to fit in 3-ish pages. 4 maybe for a big one, but I don't need a novel.
That's good to know. Okay. And is there anything you look for first when you open a proposal? Do you go right to the price or?
I think because I'm a researcher at heart, I tend to look at what's the methodology.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's the background, the fluff, all of that good stuff, setting the context. Yeah, I get it. But okay, what's your understanding of my problem or my challenge that I'm trying to face in the context? And then what's the proposal for the method and why? And then I tend to look at the timeline and then I look at the price.
It's really helpful just to have that kinda, I appreciate you being candid about how you look at it because we always wonder, what does matter the most to you in a proposal and what do you look for first? So that's great to know.
Sometimes I look at the price, but without the context of do you understand the challenge and how do you want to address it and how are you breaking that down, the price doesn't really make sense.
Right, right. That's good to hear that's realized, yeah.
Yeah.
And what makes a consultant's pricing feel justified and worthwhile to you?
I think a lot of it comes with experience and case studies and knowledge of different research methods, how well they've understood the problem and discussed how they justify the approach.
Mhm.
All of that comes into play for me. If those tend to be weak and the price is very high, that's when I'm a little skeptical.
You mentioned case studies, and I was wondering, is that something that you prefer to have the consultant verbally discuss, or do you want that included in the proposal or maybe a link to it in another conversation?
I tend to like that in a conversation or a follow up email. If you've got some case studies that are public or want to talk about some that aren't as public, um, that helps me build that trust with that particular consultant. And if you've done a project similar to what I'm looking for, that just makes it even more valuable to me. And I understand you can't always share the details of that or outcomes, all of that, or even the client, but being able to discuss that in a conversation is helpful to me.
Okay, and what do you wish more consultants understood about the selection process?
It can take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And the fact that I do need to often get multiple quotes and that I might not select you this time, but that doesn't mean I won't next time. And yeah, that full process to get the final check mark, go ahead and spend this money can take some time, can be delayed due to vacations or somebody's too busy. And I do think consultants should know that I value people asking me questions in that scoping call to better understand what my needs are and what my context and situation is. Because the more you understand, the better you're going to be able to propose the right thing, the right approach.
Absolutely. I loved how you mentioned before that you want minimal selling during that call.
Yeah, minimal selling, build my confidence in you, but don't come across as a salesperson. I know you're selling, but I want you to be confident in describing yourself and your abilities.
And can you describe what your turnoffs are? Like when you hear selling, what does that sound like to you?
Oh, I've done this for so and so and so and so, and I've done this and I've done that. And oh, I've got the perfect solution for you. How do you know it's the perfect solution if you haven't really understood my challenge and what I need? Those sorts of things tend to turn me off. Too much of the, not enthusiasm, but all of those perfect words makes me think of a car salesman.
Absolutely, and that's the worst. Nobody wants to be the icky car salesman.
No.
Hopefully they don't. Yeah. And I love how you mentioned confidence, that you want to see some of that. And that's a fine line, right? What does confidence look like to you versus coming on too strong?
Good question. I think, well, getting back to your last question, I think another thing that turns me off is when consultants come to the conversation to tell me everything they can do. And
Mm.
you should hire me because I am good at this, I'm good at this, I've done this, I've done that. Before they even understand what I'm looking for.
Mm.
So I like that consultative sell. and then being confident to come back and ask questions. Well, tell me more about what you're looking for. Why is this the challenge you're facing right now? Why
Yeah.
is this the problem to solve? What are you going to do with this information? How is this going to help you in the business? To me, that demonstrates confidence that you're willing to challenge me appropriately and respectfully.
There's something interesting here. So I love that we're having this conversation because there's no pressure of a job here. Like I can kind of lay it all out there for you. What I worry about as a consultant that's pitching or just having a discussion, about a project, a lot of times we talk about how in our proposals we suggest strategies, we propose some methodologies, and you can take that and shop that around. Right? And that's part of the what you're purchasing really is just how would we go about this? What's the strategy we would choose? And we can come up with something that's really great that works within your budget. And ultimately, for whatever reason, you're not going to choose us. And it's always a bummer. It's, oh man, they got some good strategy for nothing. And we kind of accept that. That's just what sometimes how it works. But sometimes it's, oh man, I know they're shopping this around, or you don't know how much you should reveal, but you also want to make sure that you ask those right questions that you care about and say, have you thought about this? Perhaps this is a better approach without giving away too much. I don't know what your reaction is to that.
I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but I'll tell you, as a researcher turned director, I would appreciate that. I know
Mhm,
you're asking for this. Have you thought about why?
mhm.
This other thing. And I may have. And I may come back with, yeah, we thought about that because of this other information that I hadn't shared yet that might not be right. Or I'm perfectly willing to say, oh, that's an interesting perspective. And then I might come back and ask, could you give me two proposals for each and see how that turns out? Or why don't you think through that and we can have another call before you write official proposal, something like that.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm open to being questioned and challenged. I don't think every client will likely be in that boat, though.
But no, that's something I definitely appreciated working together. For the diary study that you hired me to conduct, the scope was so large that I needed to bring on another independent researcher as a subcontractor. And I'll give a quick shout out to Anna Kopp, who was wonderful. Her company is Blue Umbrella and she's based in Toronto. So if anyone needs a great researcher, she's amazing. But from your perspective, how did that feel as the client? Was there anything you needed to know or understand about the subcontractor to feel confident in this setup?
I think because we had a history of a good relationship, I fully trusted your judgment. If this was my first time working with you, I probably would have wanted a call with Anna as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just to make sure, just to sanity check. Um, but yeah, it worked out great. The two of you did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I'm always curious about that. The idea that this is somebody else, another independent consultant that is working on my project. Is any of that confusing for the client perspective? Is it understood that this is someone who's not technically an employee?
From my standpoint, I completely understood it. I think because I had that history of working at Mad Pow at the design agency where we would subcontract folks
Mhm.
as we needed it, I knew that was clear. And I believe you communicated it well too, as I recall. So I think just being upfront and saying, hey, happy to do it under one umbrella. I've worked with this person before, but she's not an employee of mine, I think is perfectly fine.
All right. So before we switch over to more of the questions that would probably benefit people that would hire consultants, I'm curious from your perspective, how do you view the job of the consultant?
I'm hiring you to do some work. So I need you to gain my confidence in you up front, as we've been talking about. And I need you to deliver the agreed upon work. And while you're doing that, communicate frequently. because we have our specific business context and we have related past research insights that I want to make sure that you get and can take advantage of. I always want to review deliverables from consultants, particularly with that lens. How is this going to land with our stakeholders related to everything that's going on from a business and a strategy perspective, as well as how it may resonate with or contradict past research? And if there's contradictions, I need to be able to explain that myself. And as I mentioned earlier, just communicating progress and escalating issues as needed. But I think the real job you're doing that often goes unspoken is to make me and my team look good to my boss, to our stakeholders. As part of that, I need you to deliver the honest and objective truth to me and my team as appropriate. And let us determine how to message and communicate those issues to stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, if somebody undercuts us and says something to a stakeholder, we don't look so good.
Right.
So come through us, let us figure out how to message and communicate. There may be some stakeholders I'm okay letting you talk to directly, but otherwise, I may want to be present in that conversation or have my team member present.
This is super interesting because I hear from a lot of different consultants that we are really brought on to reveal the truth. Sometimes the ugly truth that it's hard for internal people to reveal. And it's our job, as hard as it is, to sometimes have those tough conversations. And how do you feel consultants should handle tough findings or sensitive feedback? What's that right balance between honesty and diplomacy?
That's a good question. And what I always did when I was a consultant, s- eh, well, first off, I got the best compliment I've ever received from a coworker who said, "You can tell a client that their baby is ugly and get away with it."
That is
Because what I do is I say, "Hey, here's objectively, here's what we're seeing. Start with the positive, then move to the not so good. This is the reality. And when it comes to the recommendations, this is how we can make it better." That's always been my formula. Being objective, letting the data, the quotes, the videos speak for themselves, and then closing with, here's our recommended path forward to improve this.
right.
And that has done me well, both as a consultant and internally, to be able to deliver bad news to the business, because at the end of the day, we do need to hear that bad news, because how else are we going to get better?
And when you talked about reviewing the deliverables, so possibly that bad news could be in that final report that has to get shared. What
Mhm.
is your ideal review process? Is it hands-on feedback or more high-level checkpoints?
I like the high level checkpoints. As soon as you're seeing the bad news, let's chat so I can figure out, okay, how do we want to position this? When you've got a draft deliverable, as soon as you're comfortable having me look at it, the sooner we can make adjustments as needed. And then obviously just the final, just a sanity check. But I don't want to leave the big stuff to that final review,
Mhm.
because by then we usually have a stakeholders meeting scheduled. And I don't want to leave too little time to figure out how to address it before that presentation or meeting or whatever.
You don't wanna be learning these insights for the first time with the stakeholders in that presentation.
Or the night before. No.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. So now for, the managers, directors out there that might be hiring folks, how do you ensure consultants are set up for success after they're hired?
Yeah, definitely what we talked about earlier about pairing them with someone on my team, or if I had the bandwidth, planning to work with them closely. Really making sure that the consultant has a full understanding of the business context, past research, stakeholder needs, any expectations you have for them. Ensure that the consultant gets their questions answers more quickly than I may be able to, which is why I often involve that team member. And make sure that my team member is closer to the research as well, so that they can understand the details enough to know how to use it and answer questions after the engagement. That's important too, because we can't just take something and drop it. We have to carry it forward. So the better we understand it, the more successful the end result will be.
Right. Now, you mentioned the internal person that you assign to the consultant. What
Uh-huh.
qualities do you look for in that person that you select? Are they more of a peer, a coordinator, a domain expert?
I think somebody that can do all of those, somebody that understands the business enough. So I had somebody who worked with you who had been with me for 4 years. I wouldn't have assigned somebody brand new to the business, but she knew the business context. She knew the problem space that you were addressing. So that really helped. She could provide you the relevant information and then be that sanity check of, okay, how is this sitting with what we know? Is it filling in the blanks? What contradictions are there, if any? How do we navigate that if there are contradictions? And she was senior enough to be able to just trust you as well and not have to dive in and be involved all the time.
Internal politics is something that we typically are spared from, you know. But I would imagine others who are thinking of bringing consultants on might be curious to know when you tag someone on your team to do this, to pair with a consultant and answer their questions or whatever. Is it typically looked at as, "Okay, you're adding to my list of responsibilities"? Is there an issue there, or is it more have you found that most are just willing and excited to be part of that?
I always talk with them and say, hey, I'd like you to do this. What kind of time commitment do you think it's going to take? How does that work with your current workload? Do I need to shuffle some of your priorities? Do you have the bandwidth to do this or not? And sometimes I may have a couple of possibilities of my internal team members. One may be swamped and can't do it. So maybe I go for the other one or figure out, use my ability as a director to reshuffle what they're working on. Can we maybe transfer something that's a little bit more defined to somebody more junior for you to mentor as well, to give you time to work with the consultant?
I think it's really wise that to pair someone with the consultant, as you mentioned, so that the work is not lost after the consultant leaves, because there's nothing worse than that. And is there anything else you would recommend to other UX managers to ensure internal teams can just run with the findings once the consultant steps away?
Yeah, just getting that biggest knowledge and then advocating with it like we do with all of our research. Making sure we're sharing it with the right stakeholders, making sure it goes into our repository that it's findable, that anyone can access it. And one of the things we always put in our repository is who to contact. So,
Mhm.
yes, this is an external consultant deliverable, but hey, go ask so and so for the questions on this one.
And have you found any shortcuts or artifacts that are especially helpful for ramping up a consultant quickly?
I think one of the things we started doing late in my tenure at Viator, because we had a lot of disparate research and we didn't have a strong repository at the time, we created some short insight documents about particular topics. For example, we got reviews on all of our travel experiences, and you can imagine reviews are important to people booking an experience. So, what we did is we just created a couple of page Google Doc that had the summary of, hey, here's all the studies where we got insights about reviews. Here's some of the findings, the links, the high level, and just summarize that kind of document about everything we know about this is very useful to provide to a consultant if you have something like that.
I imagine AI might be possibly helpful in that regard, assuming it's not incorrect. That's not hallucinating.
Yeah, I think if we had a research repository or an AI tool at the time that would have made it a lot easier to do.
Yeah.
My recommendation with AI, whenever you're having it do summaries, is to make sure it cites its sources.
Yeah.
So you can go back and make sure, yes, that's correct if you need to.
And what would you say are some lessons learned from hiring outside help? Is there anything you would do differently now?
I think more collaboration, as we've talked about, between the internal team and the consultant, as well as between the consultant and internal stakeholders.
Mhm.
I think getting the stakeholders involved a little bit more with the consultant would give the consultant some of that context they need directly, as well as allowing the stakeholders to understand that this source, this consultant coming to us and doing research for us is trustworthy, and just getting that trust established there, that they can transfer the trust they put in our team to this particular consultant. And I think also it just helps them better understand the process and the deliverables so they can take it forward and use it in their work better. For example, with the diary study we did have to educate our stakeholders a little bit more on what is a diary study and why is this important and how do you use this information? Because for many of them, it was their first time encountering a diary study. And I think over my years of working in leadership, I've realized that for research, oftentimes workshops are better than written reports. So these days, I would be even open to conducting a workshop with stakeholders. Here's some of the data, bring in the most useful data points. How would you organize it? What are the insights that are important to you and why to help us pull that together?
Can you say more about that? So, what do you think hits better with the workshop versus the report?
I think getting the product managers are the key stakeholders for this, getting them to engage in the actual data and understanding what we're learning. Maybe not everything because we did such a large diary study, but the key insights with a few specific quotes or video clips. I think the more that they can engage with that, the more they understand it and the more they actually take it on board and actually think about how they can leverage it. Granted, it isn't always easy to get workshops scheduled, particularly in a large, fast moving organization.
Yeah, yeah, but I agree definitely that workshops are so much more actionable at times, or you can see the
Mhm.
data, play with it a little bit. Are there any specific workshop formats or activities you've seen work especially well?
I immediately go to whiteboarding on Miro or whatever tool you have to have quotes or images or even video clips you can do these days, short, cut to just one particular point. And yeah, showing that and allowing them to sticky note it, affinity map it, all of that.
Okay. And to put a bow on this section of the interview, what advice would you give to another UX leader who is hesitant about allocating budget to a consultant?
Yeah, I think at the right times, bringing consultants in can be very beneficial. And what I consider those right times are when you have way too much important strategic work that your team can get done well in the time allowed. But being mindful as to how to augment. I really do, as I mentioned, love that pairing with a team member who knows the domain. I think that will give you a lot of success. And maybe try smaller if you haven't done outsourcing before. Start with a smaller, non complicated, well defined study as your first one so that you can maybe save the more complex stuff for your team. Get a consultant to do a usability study or a card sorting study that's a little bit more defined that you can practice working with an external consultant yourself and see what how you like that process and what you can learn from that process before diving into a big diary study like we did together.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because this brings up another question I have. So, from the client side, you've got an abundance of KPIs or something else that you're trying to hit. You've got a lot of initiatives, only so much staff, and you want to augment that. How do you know when this is the ideal point to bring someone in for temporary help versus adding to the fixed cost of your team? At what point do you say, okay, consultant's great, but we could use this extra help all the time?
Yeah. A lot of it depends on how, well, first off, just the context. What's the financial context right now? Is this even feasible for me to be able to get a head count? Oftentimes, I need to justify that. What are you going to get for this head count? And I may not be able to justify a full-time head count because there's a lot of overhead with full-time. So do I think this extra demand is likely to be long-term? Oh, they just added 3 new product managers to who I need to support. I am likely going to need a new FTE for long-term. Or is it, hey, this is just peak season for research because we're gearing up to start really pushing forward on a few strategic initiatives. We just need to get all the research done now, the strategic research done in the next 3 to 6 months, but the rest of the year is going to be a little slower. Then that's a better time to bring in a consultant.
I see. All right. Before we wrap up, I know you're now making the leap into independent UX consulting. And
Mhm.
I wonder if you could just fill us in a little bit about that. What inspired that decision?
As I've mentioned before, I have spent half of my career in consulting, and I decided now's the time for me to venture out. So I'm starting Perspecta Consulting, really helping companies understand their products and customers from multiple perspectives and plotting the best path forward for them. So really helping them with research and strategy. And specifically, I've learned so much about some of these AI tools out here now, understanding what they're good at and where they still need human assistance. So educating with that, helping teams select the right tools and adjusting their processes in the right way. Or if they've been asked to do an AI project, so many AI projects are not meeting their potential and, quote, failing. A lot of the companies out there, HBR and Wall Street Journal, are predicting between, I think it's 50 to 85% of these AI product projects are failing. So, how can we work together early in this stage to figure out what's the best match between AI capabilities and user needs so that we can end up helping you build something that has a much higher likelihood of being very successful for both the users and the business?
And has anything surprised you so far in the process of setting up your business, naming it, branding it?
It's been harder than I thought it would be, but I'm also very fortunate. I have a large network of folks who've been providing me with good advice. So I'm at the stage of my life where I'm listening to all the advice and figuring out what makes sense for me. I now have that wisdom to know what value I bring to what kind of company for what kind of tasks. And I'm excited to focus on that.
I'm excited for you. It sounds great.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, how has your experience as someone who's hired consultants shaped how you're approaching becoming one yourself?
Oh, great question. I think really when it comes to the sales process, I'm a consultative sailor. Hey, what are you facing? What's going on with you? What's keeping you up at night? What do you need help with? What don't you know? You know what? I can help you with some of this. And I'm a big helper. That's the way I like to view the world. I like to help people. And if I don't know how to help you, but I understand your problem, I may know people in my network I can recommend that you talk to.
Mhm.
And I just feel like if you give to the universe gives back to you.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think this is fantastic. I think it would be very full circle of our relationship if we actually end up working together again, but as independent consultants this time.
I like that idea.
Yeah. We'll have to make that happen. For the listeners, where can people find you and learn more about your new business?
Yeah, I'm still setting everything up, so the best way right now is to find me on LinkedIn. I'm Susan A. Mercer on LinkedIn.
I'll be sure to include that link in the show notes. And Susan, thank you so much for joining me today. It was just incredibly valuable to hear your perspective, not just as someone who's hired UX consultants, but now as someone stepping into that role yourself. And I know our listeners, whether they're consultants or UX leaders, are going to take a lot away from this and what you shared.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really fun conversation.
Oh, so happy. Come back anytime. And just thank you so much for being part of the UX Consultants Lounge.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Thanks for joining me. So, do you have a topic or a question that you would like us to explore on a future episode of the UX Consultants Lounge? Perhaps there's an anonymous consulting story you want to submit. If so, click on the link in the show notes to submit your story or question from the podcast website. Until next time, keep that consultancy going. I can't wait to have you back at the lounge for our next episode.